This book presentation with Aika and Ifri.
There's a microphone right there.
Is necessary the microphone?
It helps with the recording.
Okay. Thank you.
It might not be on, we'll have to see.
Hello. All right, no, go ahead. Well, thank you so much to join us in this book presentation of Aika and Ifri, Navigating the Trade Landscape, a Latin American Perspective, building on the WTO MC13. The governance of agriculture and food trade is facing unprecedented challenges in a rapidly evolving global landscape. As traditional agricultural trade issues such as domestic support and market access seem to lose their prominence in the feasibility of advancing with multilateral strategy diminishes, the focus of shifting toward the environmental and nutritional dimensions of food systems. With an increasing global emphasis on sustainability and food security, the urgency to address emerging agricultural trade issues has intensified. The WTO, as the leading institution of multilateral trade negotiations, must now redefine the roles, functions, and organizational structure to address these pressing global concerns effectively. This new publication from Ifri and Aika delves into these challenges, exploring their implications for Latin America. The collection of papers provide in-depth analysis on the evolving agricultural trade landscape, highlighting the key negotiations issues from Latin America perspective. Join us to engage. Thank you so much. Join us to engage with the authors and discussants as they explore the future of agricultural trade and the role of Latin America in shaping this critical global discourse. Me, Gloria, Abraham, Peralta, I'm the moderator of this roundtable and this book presentation. And the speakers will be Valeria Piñeiro, the regional representative of the Latin America and Caribbean region and senior research coordinator in the Markets, Trade and Institutions Unit at the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFRI. Her recent work includes modeling the impact of agricultural support policies on emissions from agriculture and reviewing the evidence on incentives for the adoption of sustainable agricultural practices and their outcomes. Her work in Latin America and the Caribbean region includes development strategies and economic growth, trade policies, effects of economic downturn, migration, and tax policies to reduce obesity. She has significant experience working in these areas of economic development and growth using general equilibrium models as an analytical tool, and has for the last several years led courses in many countries teaching the theory of application of the CGE models. Valeria received her PhD in agricultural economics from the University of Maryland. And also we have Lloyd, Deputy Director General of Aika, is a United States citizen and assumed his position as a Deputy Director General in the Aika on July 1st, 2012. He started career with the Governor of California, eventually becoming the Deputy Secretary of International Trade and Investment for California. Moved to Washington, D.C. to serve as an administrator of USDA's Agricultural Marketing Services, head of Federal Government Affairs at Syngenta, and now Deputy Director General of ICA. Mr. Day has received a bachelor's degree and master's degree from Stanford University and the University of Glasgow. And also with us is Diego Alfieri, is a career diplomat currently serving as the mission of Brazil to the WTO, in charge of the negotiations in agriculture under Article 20 of the Agreement of Agriculture and the discussions on sustainable agriculture. Previously, he has worked with a broader range of agriculture-related issues, including those in the FAO, OECD, and G20, and the BRICS, and bilateral relations at the Division of Agriculture Policy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He has a specialist degree in international and economic law at the State University of Londrina and an MBA in agribusiness at the University of Sao Paulo. He has part of the Brazil's delegation for the MC13 at Abu Dhabi. Well, we start with Valeria with the presentation of the book. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gloria, and thank you all for being here with us. It's really, and thank you, Diego, for reading that book in advance. First of all, I would like to say that this is, I'm going to present the summary of the book, but there we go. As you can see, it's been a team effort. So there are many institutions and many authors that were part of this. So I would like you to, I'm not going to say the name of all of them, but you have them there. But again, I want to really thank IICA for being great partners on this, and also the other institutions that are part from this. The other thing is that this is the third book in this series. We started this one with MC11, that it was done in Buenos Aires. And the idea of these kind of books is that they are, what we call them small books, but that we're hoping that being able to carry the perspective from Latin America into what it is the agricultural trade, international agricultural trade, it is very important. And we're hoping that at least we can contribute somehow in helping moving forward negotiations at the WTO and bringing, again, the perspective from Latin America. So that is the idea of the book. So this book is divided basically in three sections in a way. So first of all, we went to try to, the first couple of chapters, try to put it into context of where we are in terms of the agricultural trade, international trade, and the other things. But then we have two more sections. One in which we tried to cover all the themes and topics that are discussed in the Committee of Agriculture and that they've been here for some time. There are three of them that have long and persistent importance, which is the ones that we're covering: reduction of subsidies and market distortions that provide unfair advantages to some producers over others and distort global trade. And then the discussion of this redirecting, or what it is called repurposing. The second one is improving global food security through trade regulations that enhance and protect local food supplies in net importing countries, as well as trade liberalization measures that increase productivity and commercial opportunities for the net exporting countries. And again, we tried to cover those two, or the dichotomy that we have in Latin America. We're very heterogeneous. We have some net food importers, but also net food exporters. And then the third one is addressing non-commercial concerns, such as environmental standards, sustainability, animal welfare, and food safety, by establishing norms that address these concerns without creating trade barriers. And then the second section of this book is more related with emerging issues, stemming from the rapidly changing technological and geopolitical context. And two general topics in particular relevant and challenging for agricultural trade that really sets an overall perspective and concerns that we try to, again, cover in this book. The first one is that trade and technological tensions arising from increasing economic competition among major economies pose really challenges related to compliance with trade norms and agreements, including the establishment of new trade standards and norms that should be agreed upon in the context of the WTO environment. And then the second one is the supply chain resilience and security. Again, recent disruptions in global supply chains due to the pandemic, but also the economic decoupling, have highlighted existing vulnerabilities and improving the supply chain resilience and establishing new types of trade agreements that address food supply insecurities in net importing countries emerge as a new opportunity. And so this is kind of one of the first couple of chapters that we have. Then, sorry, but putting it again in context, this figure, it has actually many different figures, but agricultural trade has really experienced a slight increase as a proportion of total trade over the last 15 years, suggesting greater stability in food demand and trade needs resulting from this demand, even in times of economic instability and seen in recent years. And that is the figure on the left upper left. The graph on the left below shows really the world's major regions according to their position as net exporter or net importers of food. The significant role of the Western Hemisphere as net exporters, particularly Brazil and Canada, as you can see there with the green bars, as well as the position of Asia, the Near East, and North Africa as net importers. On the other hand, in the graphs on the right, we group the countries according to their general political alliance. The graph shows a substantial graphical and political imbalance in food trade needs. Again, the Western Alliance as a net food exporter, while the other group led by China and some extent by Russia are net food importers. So this creates global trade environment and some role that the WTO can take in three key areas that really shows urgent attention. The first one will be removing harmful subsidies to encourage more sustainable agricultural production, again by investing in the right technologies and optimizing production in regions with natural resources. The second one will be creating public stockholding policies to manage uncertainties in global trade, especially with geopolitical changes and supply chain disruptions. And then the third one is developing frameworks for bilateral and plurilateral trade agreements to ensure food security for important countries in a certain trade environment. So these are the key things that we thought in these chapters, again, to put it into context of where we should be heading. Then the following chapter, to finish this, put it in context, is actually written by Gloria, that she's here with us, and Adriana Campos, so I'm not going to go into detail here. She can mention some of these in later when she speaks, but these are kind of the three messages about the institutional framework that it has to go into this concept. And then moving forward, we will go into what it is, the three key topics that we thought, actually we didn't think. It was based on some IISD and IFPRI. We did some webinars in 2023, and we highlighted these three topics as the three ones that, again, that were done under the Committee of Agriculture, but that we thought that they had some interest from the delegates, actually, and in the negotiation framework. So the three that we were working on, you can see there, but again, is the domestic support, the public stockholding, and export restrictions. The idea of these webinars and what we highlight then in this chapter, written by Facundo Calvo, is they really highlight the trade-offs that arise and the necessary balances that are needed into this. And in order, I'll just move. And then going into these three topics, the first one that we cover here is the public stock holdings, written by Joe Glover. And what he found here is that, again, permanent solution has been sought since MC9 in Bali, And he finds that two things to really highlight. One is a technical issue in which fixed external reference price based on an outdated base period from 86, 88 that doesn't really reflect current market prices or implicit support levels. So the figure shows, figure on the top figures how sometimes prices were above the reference period and sometimes below. He mentioned some technical solutions that we can think about. One is to update to a more recent period or base on a moving average of prices. But then there are some questions that arise, again, even thinking about this. One is, should we adjust, this adjustment be applied only to MPS or only to PSH? So that is one of the things that he discusses in this chapter. But then there's also the exemption issue. So should PSH support be extended from AMS, the aggregate measure of support disciplines? And then there come some discussions about that. Concerns about the programs where PSH restores production and trade, if there is a need for a recourse against potential adverse trade effects of PSH programs, should PSH support be exempt only in cases where exports and stock levels are minimal, and the last one is an exemption only for least developed countries and net for important developing countries. So these are the kind of things that he mentions. And then that table that I included there, it relates with PSH programs that reflects India and China actually in that figure. And it's just to highlight that, for example, China's stock wheat, rice, and corn are quite large compared to other programs. It represent more than 75% of China's corn and rice production and more than 100% of its wheat. And then the same description goes into what's going on in India. And I think I'm running out of time and I'm trying to cover all the chapters, so I will leave for you that. And then this chapter that we did with David Labor and Elsa Olivetti relates with this discussion about repurposing or redistribution, as I rather use that terminology. What we did was using the Milagro model, which was a CG model. We analyzed the effects of a variety of indicators, measuring food security, nutrition, and also climate outcomes of doing two different scenarios. One was how we can redistribute support within the borders of one country, and the other one was between countries. So the economic impact that we saw is that global GDP rises due to an increase of efficiency from the harmonization of the subsidies. The Latin American sub-regions, such as the Caribbean, Southern Corner, and Central America, saw GDP growth. And then the social outcomes that we saw is that extreme poverty and undernourishment really decreased in the region that were receiving financial aid. So these two scenarios, what we did was to make equal the support for the farmers in the regions. And again, one was between the same country and the same commodities. So again, subsidies, as you know, they are really concentrated in just a few commodities. That basically it is livestock and rice and some other staples. So what we did was to try to make them more homogeneous with the other commodities to eliminate that bias. So it was a matter of leveling the playing field. And then in the environmental impact, we saw there was a slight global rise in agricultural emissions, underscoring the importance of integrating technology and R&D to address these impacts. And then in terms of some key messages was that reducing and eliminating trade distorting domestic can really lower the cost of both current and healthier diets. That's actually a concern these days, the cost of the healthy diets. And then the modeling also shows that removing existing distortions alone isn't enough, so that we really need to invest in technologies to really address that increases in productivity gaps, that it is crucial to really see the good impacts that we want to see. And then the redistribution of cross-border support could really benefit low and middle income countries. So that, again, it just highlights the importance of getting to a more equitable and global distribution of resources. Okay. And then the last one of this section, which relates with export restrictions. The COVID-19 pandemic and the geopolitical conflicts have definitely heightened the volatility in international trade, leading to increasing export restrictions, specifically in agricultural products. That this is what this chapter deals with. So during stable periods, positive trade measures are more common, but in times of volatility, negative measures like export bans increase and persist. So a lack of transparency with the delay of or inadequate notification to the WTO and the paralysis of the dispute settlement body weaken really the WTO's capacity to enforce these rules, or at least to monitor them. So the authors highlight that to address these challenges, this is a recommendation for a multilateral approach to improve transparency, adopt less trade distorting policies like export duties, and foster collaboration through initiatives like AMIS, the Agricultural Market Information System. And then the second part of the book really talks about two things that are not really covered per se under the Committee of Agriculture, but that there are things that have been discussed also at the WTO, which is food security concerns and environmental standards, or sustainability, environmental sustainability, and it has been really discussed and taken by the WTO and all the countries here. And so this chapter explores, this one is about the sustainability, and explores the intersection of trade and sustainable development, particularly through the voluntary sustainability standards. So it really deals with that, this chapter. And so examines how these standards can enhance trade by improving market access, brand reputation is important, consumer trust, and also discusses key environmental themes, challenges that are also seen with the implementation of these standards, and suggests also solutions, like for example, modernizing the standards, enhancing transparency, creating monetary incentives, which I think that this is the key thing that it is found, how we can create these incentives to really make the farmers implement and adopt all these standards. Also, it addresses the complex landscapes of these standards, the WTO's ongoing work in agri-food trade, and calls for a global governance framework to address the environmental concerns. It also proposes some preferential tariffs for environmentally efficient agricultural products. So again, this chapter can really delve into those details. And then the other one from this section that relates with food security more than anything. And so addresses the impact of trade on the global food insecurity crisis. It really focuses on the increasing trade restrictions, non-tariff barriers, private standards, and disruptions in value chains. It highlights the trade's role in promoting food security and presents several recommendations for the WTO. These include improving market access, ensuring non-tariff barriers, non-discriminatory, advancing regulatory convergence for least developed countries, incorporating private standards into the WTO discussions, and concluding negotiation of export restrictions, repurposing domestic support, promoting public stock holdings, and enhancing transparency in the global fertilizer market. So again, the same concepts coming back through all the chapters in a way. And then the final, just to really be ending, so Gloria, I'm going to be your time.
Okay.
So that there are really two main observations at the very end that we concluded, coming from the evidence from all these 8 chapters that I just run you through, which I know that I was very fast, but the book is there, so I didn't want to go into the details, and plus I didn't write all the chapters, so I don't want to do, I want to make justice from them. But the first observation is that the issues addressed in the 4 chapters, focusing on matters that have been central to the traditional WTO agenda, have been on the negotiating table for many years, with little or no progress in sight, or at least till now. So furthermore, new geopolitical events discussed in Chapter 1 have really exacerbated the disagreements and differences concerning the perspectives and needs of countries with different economic and trade interests and different negotiation positions. And then the second observation, it really highlights in the second round of chapters, so in 7 and 8, with the last one, were focused on new issues related to the intersection of environmental, climate change concerns with the trade standards. These issues have not yet been fully integrated into the WTO agenda, and the main challenge lies in the lack of global governance mechanisms to define and implement rules and standards for these global issues. And again, it's the implementation, the monitoring, the verification of all these things. So in conclusion, from looking at the perspective from Latin American countries, it seems that there are three things that we can try to work towards. One is the full incorporation into the WTO agenda of the definition of the environmental standards and norms that affect trade. The second one would be the full incorporation into the WTO agenda of the definition of standards and norms related to human nutrition, similar to how sanitary and phytosanitary standards have been integrated. And then the last one is the multilateral agreements that could provide flexibility for a group of countries with common interests to make special agreements to facilitate trade among them. And we think that with these three last points, it could be a very good way of starting at least the conversation between us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Valeria, for providing us with a great summary of the book and highlighting the key topics we need to reflect on. Thank you so much. And now the floor is for Diego to give us a perspective and comments of the book. The floor is yours, Diego.
Ambassador, and thank you, Valeria, for this explanation of the book. I think it's important to say how important is the work that IFPRI is doing, also AICA, because they are consolidating some publications that are very helpful for us who are negotiating here at the WTO, particularly to Latin American countries who usually don't have access to such data that is specific to their realities. So this provides us with some background, some good information to work, to negotiate, to defend our positions here, and even to better coordinate, because this is something that didn't happen at the WTO in Geneva before. The Latin American countries, they weren't together as we are now today. We're trying to build coordination and convergence in our positions. It's not easy. As Valeria was saying, there are different realities in the region, but we have more similarities, and we do trust and rely on trade. We still have trade as a tool for economic development, something that is missing nowadays in international relations. This is a problem. We have there's no more consensus around trade as being something good for member development, sustainable development, the three pillars of development. And this brings, that's why it's important books like this, the third in the series that IFPRI and AICA have produced. And Valeria was saying, it's not by chance that there is a Latin American perspective here, because we are a region that is a net food exporter. So we have interested, we are able to produce sustainably enough food for our own consumption. We do have our problems, but we do produce enough food, and we have to spare, to export, and we are competitive without utilizing subsidies. That's why we are so interested in a fairer multilateral trading system. And it's important also to highlight that the book, as I said, is pro-trade, but it's not, no, we're not going back to the 90s, a Washington consensus view, or just a liberalization and trade will be the answer to everything. There's all the concerns on food security and environmental sustainability, they are throughout the text. And this is very important for us to understand how to tackle the negotiations here, and also in other multilateral forums, because we cannot just talk about trade without linking it to food security concerns and to environmental sustainability concerns. I think they walk hand in hand, and if you, even if there's no direct, maybe there's no exclusive cause and consequence of the facts, but if you look into data regarding the growth of international trade in food products, agricultural products, and the decrease in food insecurity in the world, you see that while trade was growing, we were seeing more a sharper decrease in food insecurity levels. And when they both platooned, there was no more increasing in trade of egg products, and we began noticing some decrease in food security indicators. It's in the same time, it's in a period of time. I would like to highlight two issues here that lead also then to the conclusion that the pathways that Valeria was explaining now in the end, with both the discussions on repurposing and the environment and voluntary sustainability standards. I think the repurposing is an issue that sometimes it scares some people because there is also some fear that this is about greenwashing subsidies. That is, members that used to spend huge amounts of money, now they just change the name of the program, they call it something green or environmentally sustainable, and it's the same program, the same objectives. And in the end, it leads to the same kind of distortions that we are trying to contain here at the WTO through the negotiations of domestic support of subsidies. I think it gives, it's important, the book, it brings an adequate concept, the idea of shifting towards the policies that will lead to sustainable intensification, to more investments in technologies, in innovation and research, because that's what will allow countries to produce more food, because this is needed. We have a problem of food around the world, but produce our healthy foods in a sustainable manner. It's interesting also because it provides us with a good literature review of many researches about repurposing. You'll find more than 10 different measurements, different options on how to address these. But then it gives a good review of what has been produced, and then also brings some new ideas on how this repurposing or redirection, how Valeria was saying, it's important. I think that, and then it gives this redirection of subsidies, but it's always important to keep in mind that the subsidy needs a little bit to change as well. It leads to this idea of how to produce more sustainably, investments in technologies and innovation. And I think one thing that is curious that in the end it's not a radical transformation from what we have in the agreement on agriculture. It's an agreement of almost 30 years, but it still has some good concepts because the agreement on agriculture was made for us to shift from distorting forms of support to non-distorting forms of support. And we have one of the categories that we consider non-distorting is what we call general services, in which there's space for investments in research and technology, as I was saying, on extension services, on the provision of sanitary services, infrastructure, all of those things that we need to do now even more to increase the sustainability and lessen the distortions of the system. They are compatible with the system. With some reform, there's a pathway to arrive there. And also, I think it's very important to talk about the chapter that talks about the voluntary sustainability standards and the environment in general. That's one thing that it is even though it's voluntary, it should be some consider private standards. The way domestic regulations have been evolving nowadays, they're making this kind of standards mandatory, even more mandatory. If members have due diligence legislation obliging making the companies to be due diligent, or they will use this kind of standards, voluntary standards, to guarantee that they are being due diligent. So in the end, they are almost as a requisite for trade to take place. And there's really a need for us to discuss this. I personally don't think this kind of standard, voluntary sustainability standards, are per se TBT issue. This is a personal position. Of course, there are some that are related, but as they delve into issues related to production methods that do not affect the final characteristics of a product, this is not a technical measure, in my understanding, under the TBT agreement. And that creates a space for us to, how do we regulate this? Is there international regulation on this? Of course, it's not SPS as well. One vision that Brazil has been expressing the Committee on Agriculture, Committee on Market Access, that legislation such as the EUDR, the deforestation regulation of the EU, it's what brings me this. It's a quantitative restriction because it's not, in our view, a technical measure per se. So it's under the GATT that can be justified through the general exceptions of the GATT, Article 20. But it's a different discussion, and that creates a space for us to think about, can we engage in negotiations, in discussions to see how we can bring this issue, this matter to the WTO? I think there's a space, because you cannot simply realistically expect that members will not adopt this kind of regulations anymore. They are happening, more and more members are assessing this kind of legislation and regulation. So how can we make it non-discriminatory? How can we make it less distortive and less restricted to trade as possible? Whereas why we guarantee that it's really aiming for social and environmental objectives, to guarantee that it's not just a disguised restriction to trade, which is the concern of members, of developing country members in general, that we are just shifting from tariffs to SPS and TBT measures, and now to environmental and social barriers to trade, which pursue legitimate objectives, but we need to take care of that. So I think there really is space for us to discuss this in the WTO. It's one of the pathways that we're discussing. And Brazil, just to conclude, Brazil, we circulated a communication to the General Council and to many committees here at the WTO about sustainable agriculture. And we are pretty much, we are suggesting that we need to have a better organization on how we discuss this, because it's in the TBT committees, in the SPS, the Committee on Agriculture, the Committee on Market Access, the CTG, they are all touching upon this, but we are going nowhere. And we need to focus this discussion to have some tangible results, to make trade also responsive to environmental concerns. And one of the issues that we put there is, one of the paragraphs that we say is that we are talking about these restrictions, but little to no attention is being given to create incentives through trade for members to improve the sustainability of their production. And I think this goes to your final point also, Valeria, on should we be looking into sectorial initiatives or to plurilateral initiatives? Should we be focusing on some kind of new discussions to understand how we can make the system work? And all of this, I think this was the most different part of the book. All of this while we're still trying to solve it's a promissory note that was given to many developing countries back in the Uruguay round, that we would have an agricultural trading system that is less distorted, less restrictive. And so there are the traditional negotiations as well as these new things that we do need to tackle here at the WTO as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Diego. Very interesting perspective. I think we need to reflect about that. There are copies of the book on the table. On the back, feel free to take one. And now, is the time for Lloyd to take. And this opportunity, I want to ask Lloyd, what concrete proposals does the AICA suggest for reforming the WTO to adapt to the new global challenge?
Well, thank you, Gloria, and good afternoon to everyone. It's nice to see some friendly faces. Thank you to all the authors of the book. It's a lot of work. I read it on the way here from Costa Rica. It's an interesting read, and for those of you who are here, you're obviously trade geeks, so this is the kind of thing that you will like to read. I'm going to answer your question like a politician, Gloria. That means I heard you, I understood you, and now I'm going to say whatever I want. That's okay. That always gets a laugh, except I said that a couple weeks ago at the U.S. Grains Council when there was a politician in the room and he got offended. I'm sure, but he did. So I guess it was 2 months ago, Gloria, that we hosted the farm leaders of the Americas to ICA. These are the farm federations or farm bureaus from across the Americas, from Canada in the north to Argentina in the south. And one of the things that they declared in their declaration or statement from San Jose is that we need to embrace innovation and strengthen the WTO and other international standard-setting bodies. And why do they do that? Because for Latin America and the Americas in general, trade is very important. And I think it's always important to remind ourselves of why trade is important in agriculture. Trade redistributes food production. It provides a diversity of food choices and options. I remember when I was, a freshman in California going to school, and these people came from someplace foreign like New York City, and they'd never heard of avocado or what guacamole is, and now everyone knows what it is. And yet there are those complaining in some parts of the world that product has food miles associated with it and is damaging to the environment. But it's also important to the livelihood of those farmers and whole supply chain that produces that. And that's something we have to remember when we start talking about the environment and sustainability. Trade enhances price stabilization, so you don't have these huge spikes in prices. And an important component of that is market information. And we talked about the AMP system, and that's important as well. Combats hunger and malnutrition. When the conflict broke out in the Black Sea region, there was a big worry about food security. How are we going to get the grain from that part of the world to dependent areas? And the trade system worked, and thanks to that, prices stabilized also. It enhances food safety and health standards. That's sometimes controversial, but we're all more comfortable almost anywhere we go in eating food that's going to be safe and we don't get sick. That's important, and trade helps facilitate that by some of the standards that also could be related to environmental standards at some point. It boosts agricultural productivity. It enables us to use the new tools and technologies in order to grow more with less, which is important for this environmental argument. And it also allocates resources a lot more efficiently. And I think everyone in the room understands that. So there's 4 pillars for addressing food security. Those are availability, access, nutrition, and general stability. So for Latin America, which was your question, and I'm getting to it. Latin America is a breadbasket for the world. On page 127 of the book, you'll see listed all the attributes for Latin American agriculture and why it's important. It's an area that can produce more abundantly than almost anywhere else on Earth if it has the technology and the tools and the resources and global acceptance to do it. And we know that's challenging, and that's why we have a WTO and we bring issues like the EUDR that Diego just talked about here and other measures, which are very important. There's a lot of room for growth in Latin America too. The Brazilian and Chilean and Argentine miracle hasn't hit all of Latin America, and when it does, that productivity boost is going to be important. And we also have to think about the millions of poor farmers, the small farmers, that don't have access to technology. That once they have that access to technology, they're going to be able to produce in a more efficient way than they ever have before. So Latin America is a key to global food security as well as to environmental security. And it's important that we think about that. And in that, we have to understand and embrace technology. And I know that's sometimes not a popular topic here at either the WTO or on this side of the Atlantic. But innovation is what is going to provide us with tools in order to produce enough food, feed, fiber, electricity, energy for the world to address the challenges of climate change. So we have to think about that. And as we think about environmental regulations and things that Diego was just talking, we have to also understand that no one size fits all when it comes to regulating a world with diverse regions, topographies, growing conditions, climates, and cultures. Regulations must understand that, and they don't always, as we know it. Misaligned regulations have the ability to destroy whatever kind of innovation and progress that we're achieving. So this is why the WTO is important. We have to discuss these things here at the WTO. Last February, I think, was the MC13.
Yeah.
We went to Abu Dhabi and we were joined by many of our member countries. Brazil was one of them. And Costa Rica and Uruguay, United States, Canada, I'm not sure who else. Chile, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so we discussed this issue of trade and sustainability that Diego was just discussing. How do we ensure that we produce more sustainably, that we take care of the environment, but we also enable the acceptance, the embrace of the tools that we need in order to do that. And those tools are sometimes controversial in our own regions as well. I come from a place called California. So I'm not from Latin America, but if you think about it, my mother's Mexican, my dad's from Kansas, that's pretty much Latin America also. and so sometimes we raise the bar in California, and those same people from New York get mad at us and attack us as liberals and lots of other worse things, they say. But that helps raise the bar, and sometimes by raising the bar, that creates more innovation and opportunities to address those challenges. But we shouldn't do that in a misaligned way. We have to appreciate all the different topographies, geographies, cultures, and not try to ram a square peg into a round hole that sometimes happens through regulations and through certain norms like the EUDR for one. So Latin America, in response to your question, has the opportunity to feed the world. This book discusses that. It discusses a lot of the different areas that Valeria and Diego just laid out for you in the different chapters of the WTO and the different components of the WTO and the trade mechanisms. But one thing that we feel is very important is that we support the WTO, we support the multilateral system, and the rules that help us trade. We all need that. We come from a trading region, and so having a strong WTO is important. And so in the book, they lay out a number of priorities. I can tell you page, but I'm not going to find that page, so I'll just say what some of the top three are. First is restoring the dispute settlement mechanism. You guys are all trade people. You know I'm an American. I'm partially blamed for that, but it's not just the United States, it's others. The option of plurilateral agreements. If we can't get some parts of the world, we know which ones they are, to agree to things, well, we can have a plurilateral agreement. And if we can do that, we can maybe advance the ball. And once we advance the ball, others will come along. And the final one is strengthening global food security through international cooperation. That's what we do with ICA by hosting events like this and sponsoring books like this so that we can have a discussion about this with all of you. So with that, I'll stop. Madam Ambassador.
Okay, thank you so much, Lloyd, for your reflections, very, very important reflections. And well, we continue. We have half an hour to make another round of questions. Maybe we can have 2 minutes for Facundo to reflect about the chapter. Is here? No? Oh, okay. Well, and to accomplish our journey at this moment. Well, for the second question to Valeria, please, Valeria, what role do the agriculture support policies play in the promoting sustainability and food security accordingly to the outcomes?
Thank you, Gloria, for the question. First, I guess that the first thing going a little bit following Lloyd's answer, I think that domestic support is really the topic that it has to be done at a multilateral level. That is something that it can be arranged if only just a few countries get together and arrange something. So I think that this is key, and I think that that's very valuable, that things are going and they are moving here inside the WTO in that respect. Again, it's a key issue. But I think that your question goes more into this repurposing or redistributing support, as mentioned also previously. And there, I think that also the whole conversation is always brought in terms of the greenwashing that Diego was mentioning, but also in terms of, developed countries that are the ones that use more of that should be thinking about this. But I think that also developing countries should be looking at this and should be really embracing the concept of, if you have now new objectives in terms of your policy, in terms of the needs from your country. Now we have to include the environmental issues, but also health issues. So we have two different concepts here that it will really set up the idea of how we need to design these policies, again, to move forward being more sustainable. Sustainability in the broader term, which includes social, economic, and environmental. So we're changing a little bit the perspective here. And also we're now talking about not the agricultural sector, but the food system. So again, that is something that in the negotiations we keep talking about agriculture. It's very complex to start thinking about the food system. But in reality, government needs to start adjusting towards this idea of the food system. We're not just the primary sector. We have to follow the whole value chain, even considering the consumption as well. Again, when we talked about environmental, but when we talked about health and the consumer side of this. So objectives are changing. The fiscal capabilities or deficit from all these developing countries, it's even more tougher now. We don't have enough resources to really move forward this new agenda, or the same agenda, but these new concepts. So we have to be almost like very picky about how we use the money we have. So we need to think about, well, if we're giving supports to farmers, what is the best way? How is the most efficient way that we can use that money in order to come to the objectives that we have? So for example, developing countries use a lot of the support for the farmers in input subsidies. Fertilizers is the case that it's more common. Is it really the best use of the money we have to use it in fertilizers? Maybe some, but not the same. So we really need to go back to almost like the board, like if we are students, and think about how we can design the right incentives for the producers to really produce, but in a sustainable way. So maybe giving input subsidies is not the best answer. Maybe to have some credit programs conditional to some outcomes related with the environment could be better. You can subsidize, but those credit programs that at the end it will help you in moving forward to your own agenda of development and still taking care of your farmers, so you're not going to let them alone. You're really working on their livelihoods and keeping them to really go forward in a longer way. But I think that that's a better use of the available money. So again, it's not taking away that, but really making it work towards your objectives. Thanks.
Thank you, Valeria. Well, the turn now is to Diego. And talking about domestic support, I think it's important to discuss with Diego what is the importance of public stockholding programs, PSH, for food security, and what challenge do they present to the WTO context?
Thank you, Ambassador. First,
You're gonna talk.
The first time I went, I tried to escape. I went to the new team. it's a rather telling that we call food security and environmental sustainability the new teams at the WTO, but that's the reality. But let me get back a little bit to the more of the traditional negotiations that we have here in Geneva. And I'll gather just a slight detour here, because want to get to answer your question, talking a little bit about Brazil, because in the past 40 years, Brazil went from a net food importer to a net food exporter, the largest net food exporter in the world. And we did that embracing technology and embracing the opportunities that the agreement on agriculture and the WTO gave us. So we moved or shift away from market price support policies towards different sorts of support. That's how we create an environment, a domestic environment with regulations that were pro-technology, pro-innovation, and allow us to increase our production sustainably. But at the same time that we increased our production, we managed to leave the FAO map of hunger. So it was not only commodities production and exporting to the world, cheapest product available, but we are also producing food for domestic consumption, quality food, safe and nutritious food. And that was something that we were able to do 10 to 15 years ago. And what was most important for us was the development of social safety nets. It's what we call Bolsa Família. It's a program that was given, it's still in place. It's still the centerpiece of our social policy that gives some allowances to families. The condition is that the kids are enrolled in schools. It's simple, but this gave these people condition to buy their food. Of course, there was still some targeted intervention of the government. In particular, we have a very, very strong and very important policy that is that's purchase of family farmers, and then the state directly donates this food that it purchases to communities in vulnerable situations, so indigenous communities, association that takes care of women in vulnerable conditions. So the government is there, it's intervening, it's buying food from the small producers, but making them able to access markets and giving this food for people who are in vulnerable solutions. And we still have PSH, public stock holding programs in Brazil, but they are complementary to many other policies that we have. And then that's where we get to the problem here at the WTO, is that members, we do not, who are considered opponents of PSH in the negotiations. It's not that we don't recognize the value of having PSH programs as one of the tools for you to fight food insecurity. The problem is when this solution is trying to be sold as the only alternative, and an alternative that should have no limits at all. And when you have no limits at all to PSH, you are in practice making the agreement on agriculture ineffective, because one of its pillars is to have some rules, some limitations on market price supports, therefore on PSH program. And then we are stuck in this discussion of what is the appropriate level of safeguards and conditions for members to have access to PSH programs. Our position is that it should not be limited, otherwise we risk ruining everything that we have built thus far. We do this based on our own experience, on recognizing that you're not gonna change your position and as producer or exporter or importer, you're not gonna just change the food insecurity in your country only with public stock holding programs. This creates a lot of problems. So it's challenging. I think that we need to, it's easier if we can tackle that as part of the negotiations on domestic support on subsidies at the WTO, because they are, in the end, the PSH is a support policy. It's a support policy that it is intended to increase production or increase income, or at least stabilize income. We cannot separate aspect. Of course, it has a food security social aspect of it, having the supply more stabilized, guarantee that this food will reach people when they need. But there is no need for this to be completely outside of the rules. We can find solutions. I think the book it's very good on the chapter that deals with PSH because it points out it's honest approach because it says why we need to talk about PSH. It's the context of since 2007 international prices rose. We have more instability. Past 4 years have been terrible in terms of stability for international trading system. Why the rules have problem talks about the fact that we measure support having in consideration prices that were from 86 to 88. So there is an economic issue here that we need to look into it. But at the same time, it's explain why what is on the table on the part of the proponents is not simple solutions. We're not gonna, it's not simply updating the prices, the reference prices that will get a solution. It recognizes that these purchases, the reinforcement of these institutional markets through PSH, when it's done in limited, it will create distortions. It will create distortions both domestically, influencing in how much and what is produced, sometimes displacing even other producers in the country, but also internationally, because if we're talking about a price maker in the international trading system, a member that produces a lot and exports a lot, we will have an issue with other members who are trying to compete without resorting to this kind of policy, which is on theory recognized as the most distorting policy that we have available. So we need to, the tricky part here is finding the balance of how can we really allow members who need this extra support from governments, from state support, to be able to tend to their population's food insecurity needs. At the same time, we don't create a problem that ultimately will undermine the system that we are trying, even now, to reform and improve. So, stop there.
Okay. Thank you, Diego. And well, the last question is to Lloyd. And well, Lloyd, maybe you can share with us what proposal does the book offer to balance the need for food security with the demand of international trade.
Thank you, Gloria. I think what I'll talk about is 4 fundamental principles for both those that the member states of ICA and many of those around the world are focusing on when it comes to food security. The Brazilian government just wrote a very good paper for the G20. Congratulations to the hard work they did on that. And that'll be, I think disseminated widely this week. The ag ministers are meeting in Brazil in a place called Cuiabá. Close. I get it confused with Cuiabá in Costa Rica. Cuiabá. And so they're going to have an announcement on that very soon, and we at ICA working closely with the government of Brazil, and we appreciate their friendship and their hospitality there. Some key principles for this are the following 4. And the first is promote sustainable agri-food systems that support food security, environmental stewardship, maintain livelihoods, and result in social benefits for current and future generations. And I think that's really important because often when we're talking about environmental regulations, I was a little scared, as I told you last night, Gloria. We were at a party, and I don't see the person at the party, so I can talk about her. But she was scaring me about moving the needle to achieve these environmental results without thinking about how it impacted people. So I was talking about avocado farmers in Mexico or Peru or avocado or Chile and all our countries, but in other parts of the world as well. When people are trying to impose certain environmental standards or requirements, without thinking about its impact on a particular country or the farmers or the food system. And this makes me reflect about something President Noboa said when I was in a meeting of environmental ministers in Ecuador just after the shock to the security system in Ecuador in January. We had a ministerial meeting for the Ibero-American Council of Environment Ministers, and the president deviated from the script that his officials had written for him to talk about, and he said, we need to think about, because of the security situation, how do I, as a president, enable or ensure that my people have security, that they have a job, that they have economic opportunity, as well as taking care of the environment and the land and nutrition and health and all that. So we have to remember that member states have to, their core principle is to make sure that their people have the ability to take care of themselves and to thrive. And so it's a combination of all a bunch of different factors. But they have to have those social benefits for current and future generations. Second is to promote policies that are responsive to the inherent uniqueness of circumstances to which they are applying to advance sustainability and resilience in differing agri-food systems. And that again goes to the no one-size-fits-all concept that the ministers here approved in July related to sustainability. So that was I think, a step forward for the WTO, for ministers to think about that when it comes to trade and to sustainability. The third is to promote the transition of agri-food systems, as Valeria was speaking about, towards sustainability and resilience through policy and regulatory decision-making that reflect the applicable international agreements and standards. So think about Codex Alimentarius, think about the SPS Committee, think about the World Animal Health Organization. We need to support these bodies and not undermine them. And there's a problem with that happening right now. So it's important that our nation states, our member states, and others support these international standard setting bodies so that we as a globe can work together and we base it on science, not on ideology or on political science. And finally, we need to promote the role of the multilateral trading system, and I think I've already talked about that and how trade actually benefits all. Trade has become a dirty word in a lot of our governments, in my government, and we benefit from it. And so we need to actually look at history, look at concepts, look at economics, and start talking about it and start promoting it more so that our policymakers embrace it as an opportunity for their citizens and not as something that hurts them. So I'll stop there.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lloyd and Diego and Valeria, for this opportunity to reflect with us about our book, Navigating the Trade Landscape and a Latin America Perspective, Building on the WTO MC13. And well, I think we are on time. We have 2 minutes because there are another activity, and I want to share with you only 3 key messages that we put in our chapter of the book about the changing institutional landscape. And the message 1 is there is a consensus on continuing to support multilateralism and deepen the strengthen the multilateral system, as well as continuing to advance agricultural negotiations in core disciplines such as domestic support, export restrictions, and exploring innovative options to fulfill the Bali mandate on the establishment of public stockholding for food security purpose. Additionally, there are other relevant issues for the significant group of countries, such as market access, with progress in its own negotiation phase. The second message is there is a major challenge of food security and climate change stemming from innovation, the use of new technologies, and the use of science as a basis for increasing production and productivity in agri-food system. More and better production must be achieved sustainability, keeping in mind that producers are social and economic actors in countries, and therefore their economic activity must be profitable. And the last one message is trade and domestic production play an important role in improving global food security. Thank you so much to be with us this afternoon.